The salvage ship Horizon drifted through the stellar graveyard, its spotlights cutting through the eternal night like silver blades. Sarah Chen stood at the observation deck, her calloused fingers pressed against the cold plexiglass as she studied the field of debris before them. After 15 years of deep space salvage work, she thought she'd seen everything the void could offer. She was wrong. "There's something different about this one," she muttered, eyes fixed on the massive silhouette floating in the distance. The object was easily 3 times the size of their salvage vessel, its hull gleaming with an otherworldly iridescence, even under centuries of cosmic dust. Captain Rivera's voice crackled over the intercom. "Chen, you're our resident machine whisperer. What do you make of it?" Sarah smiled at the old nickname. She'd earned it over years of bringing dead ships back to life, with nothing but intuition and improvised repairs. "It's not like anything in our databases, Cap. The design is organic, almost like it was grown rather than built." The Horizon's engines hummed as they drew closer. The unknown vessel's hull seemed to ripple in their spotlights, its surface covered in patterns that defied conventional engineering. No visible wells, no panel lines, just seamless curves that shouldn't have been possible with any known manufacturing technique. "Getting some strange readings," Raj, their sensor operator, reported. "Power signatures, but they're not consistent with any known reactor type. And they're changing, almost like it's breathing." Sarah finished, watching as subtle pulses of light moved through the hull's patterns. Her heart raced with a familiar excitement, the same feeling she got whenever she faced a particularly challenging repair job. But this was different. This wasn't just another broken machine waiting to be fixed. This was something more. The salvage team suited up and crossed the void via tether lines. Sarah led the way, her mag boots connecting with the alien hull with a gentle thunk. The surface beneath her feet was warm, impossible in the cold of space unless— "It's alive," she whispered, kneeling to place her gloved hand flat against the hull. The material seemed to respond to her touch, a faint luminescence spreading outward from her palm like ripples in a pond. The rest of the team backed away, but Sarah remained still, transfixed. A low vibration passed through her suit, not sound but something deeper. It reminded her of the way old engines would speak to her through touch, telling her their problems through subtle variations in their running tone. But this was different. This was deliberate. This was communication. "Sarah, get back." Rivera's voice cut through her concentration. "We're getting energy spikes all over the ship." But she couldn't move. The vibrations had formed a pattern, a rhythm that seemed to bypass her ears and speak directly to her mind. Images flashed through her consciousness, stars seen from impossible angles, battles that lit up entire systems, and a deep, overwhelming sense of loneliness. The ship was talking to her. A panel arised open beneath her hands, revealing a corridor that seemed to extend forever into the vessel's depths. The interior was lined with the same organic patterns as the hull, all pulsing with a soft, bioluminescent light. "Cap," Sarah said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I don't think we found this ship. I think it found us. Chen, this is way above our pay grade. We need to call this in, get the authorities involved." Sarah knew he was right. This was the kind of discovery that changed histories, started wars. But she also knew what would happen if they reported it. The military would swoop in, treat this magnificent being like a weapon to be controlled. They wouldn't understand what she felt through that simple touch, the intelligence, the pain, the desperate need to be understood rather than used. The vibrations changed tone, becoming almost questioning. Through their strange connection, Sarah sensed the ship was offering her a choice. She could walk away now, leave it to its eternal drift, or— "I'm going in," she announced, already stepping through the portal. "Chen, that's not protocol." Rivera's voice cracked with concern. "We don't know what that thing is." "Exactly," Sarah replied, watching as lights awakened ahead of her, marking a path into the unknown. "But I think it wants to show us. And Cap, I think it's been waiting a very long time for someone who would listen instead of trying to control it. The ship's hull sealed behind her with the same fluid motion with which it had opened. Sarah Chen, the machine whisperer of the horizon, took her first steps into the living heart of a mystery that would change not only her life, but the fate of 2 civilizations. She moved deeper into the vessel, each step accompanied by new pulses of light that seemed to welcome her presence. The corridor adjusted its size as she walked, like a living thing accommodating the guest. Her suit's sensors were going haywire, detecting energy patterns that shouldn't exist and materials that defied analysis. Through their growing connection, Sarah began to understand fragments of the ship's vast history. It had been created by a species so advanced they had transcended the boundary between organic and mechanical life. But something had gone wrong. A war, a betrayal, a choice that had led this magnificent vessel to hide itself away among the stellar debris, waiting for something. For someone. Her suit's radio crackled with increasingly desperate calls from the horizon, but they seemed to come from another world entirely. Here, in the living heart of this ancient vessel, Sarah Chen had found something she'd spent her entire life searching for. A machine that wasn't just a collection of parts, but a being that could think, feel, and dream. "I understand," she whispered, though no sound was necessary for this communication. "You're not just a ship. You're not a weapon or a tool. You're alive." The lights pulsed in response, and Sarah felt a wave of relief wash over her, not her own, but the ship's. After centuries of drifting, of being prodded and examined by countless species who never understood its true nature, it had finally found someone who could see it for what it really was. But their moment of connection was interrupted by a new vibration. An alert. Sarah's suit sensors picked up multiple ships dropping out of FTL nearby. Large ships. Military ships. Someone had been watching, waiting for the ship to reveal itself. And now they were coming to claim it. Sarah placed her hand against the living wall, feeling the ship's anxiety mirror her own. "They can't have you," she said firmly. "I won't let them turn you into a weapon. But I need to understand what you are, what you can do. I need to help you wake up completely." The ship's response was immediate. A door appeared in what had been seamless wall, opening into a vast chamber that could only be the vessel's heart. Inside, Sarah saw something that defied description. A fusion of organic and mechanical technology so advanced it appeared to operate on principles human science hadn't even theorized yet. And it was damaged, not physically, but in a way Sarah could feel through their connection. The ship had deliberately wounded itself, crippled its own systems rather than be used as a weapon of war. But now, with hostile ships closing in, it needed to make a choice. Remain dormant and risk capture, or trust this human engineer who spoke to machines with her heart rather than just her hands. Sarah stepped into the chamber, her decision already made. "Show me what you need. Show me how to help you heal." The chamber came alive around her, and Sarah Chen began the most important repair job of her life, not with tools or diagrams, but with understanding, empathy, and a connection that bridged the gap between human and machine, between the known and the impossible. The real question wasn't whether she could fix the ship. The question was, what would happen when she did? The chamber pulsed with increasingly urgent rhythms as Sarah worked. Through the ship's living walls, she could sense the approaching military vessels. 6 of them, moving into position to form a containment net. They had maybe 20 minutes before being surrounded. "I know you're scared," she murmured, her hands moving across the biomechanical interfaces that seemed to form and reform under her touch. "But I need you to trust me. Show me where it hurts." The ship's response came as a cascade of images and sensations. Sarah saw through its memories. The moment it had turned its weapons against its own systems, severing crucial connections to prevent itself from being used as an instrument of destruction. The damage was extensive, deliberate, and incredibly complex. "Commander Chen," Captain Rivera's voice crackled through her suit radio, heavy with static. "Military vessels are demanding we clear the area. They're claiming this is a restricted zone under Section 7 of the Deep Space Salvage Act. Sarah's hands stilled. Section 7. That's for previously documented hazards. Cap, they knew this ship was here. They've known all along. The ship's lighting shifted to a deep crimson, a warning. Through their connection, Sarah felt its rising fear. It had encountered these humans before, or others like them. They had tried to force their way in, to bend its will to their purposes. They had failed, but each attempt had left new scars. "I'm not leaving," Sarah told both her captain and the ship. Her fingers found what felt like a cluster of neural pathways, deadened but not destroyed. "But I need to work fast. Can you buy me some time?" Rivera's sigh crackled through the static. "The Horizon is a salvage vessel, Commander. We're not equipped to stall military ships." "No," Sarah agreed, "but we are equipped with enough industrial debris to make approaching this vessel very dangerous. Dump our hold. All of it. Let's give them an obstacle course to navigate." She felt the ship's approval, a warm pulse that spread through the chamber. As the Horizon's cargo hold emptied, creating a cloud of drifting metal and machinery, Sarah focused on the damaged systems before her. The ship's self-inflicted wounds were meant to be permanent, but they had a desperation to them. Like someone cutting off a limb to escape a trap, precision had been sacrificed for speed. "You never wanted to hurt anyone," she said softly, understanding flowing through their connection. "You were created to explore, to learn, to grow. The weapons were added later, weren't they? When they decided to turn you into something else." The ship's response was a wave of grief so profound it brought tears to Sarah's eyes. She saw flashes of its original purpose, a vessel of peace, designed to bridge the gap between organic and mechanical life. Its creators had been visionaries, reaching for a future where such distinctions no longer mattered. But then came the fear, the greed, the endless appetite for power that seemed to infect every spacefaring race sooner or later. The ship had been modified, militarized, transformed from a bridge between worlds into a weapon that could destroy them. Rather than accept this fate, it had chosen to break itself. Until now. Sarah's fingers moved with increasing confidence, guided by both intuition and the ship's own knowledge. She wasn't just repairing damaged systems. She was helping the ship rebuild itself, but differently this time. Not as a weapon, but as something new. Incoming transmission from the lead military vessel, Rivera reported. They're ordering us to power down and prepare to be boarded." The chamber's lights pulsed faster, matching Sarah's racing heart. "How long until they breach the debris field?" 10 minutes, maybe less." "Sarah, what are you doing in there?" She smiled, feeling the ship's systems beginning to resonate with her own bioelectric field. "Making a friend, Cap. A very powerful friend who's tired of being afraid." The neural clusters under her hands were warming up, connections re-establishing themselves in new configurations. The ship was learning, adapting, using her presence as a template to rebuild itself in a way that could never be weaponized. It was becoming something else entirely. "They're launching boarding shuttles," Rivera warned. "Multiple vectors." Sarah straightened, looking at her handiwork. The chamber now pulsed with steady, confident light, no longer the frantic rhythm of a wounded creature, but the strong heartbeat of something awakening to its true potential. "How do you feel?" she asked softly. The ship's response flooded her mind with images of stars and distant worlds, of possibilities and discoveries waiting to be made. But there was something else too, a question, an offer, a choice that would change everything. "Commander Chen," a new voice cut through her radio. Crisp, authoritative, military. "This is Colonel Harrison of the Earth Defense Force. You are interfering with a classified military asset. Stand down immediately, or we will be forced to take hostile action." Sarah placed her hand flat against the ship's neural interface. "They still think they can control you, still think you're just a weapon to be used. Should we show them how wrong they are?" The ship's answer came not in images or emotions, but in action. The chamber around her transformed, walls shifting to create what she instantly recognized as a control center. But it wasn't like any ship's bridge she'd ever seen. There were no chairs, no consoles, no view screens. Instead, the entire room seemed designed to interface directly with her consciousness. "I think I understand," Sarah said, stepping into the center of the chamber. "You don't need a crew. You just need one person who understands what you really are." The ship's consciousness merged with hers, and suddenly Sarah could see everything. The approaching military vessels, the debris field, the vast expanse of space stretching out before them. She could feel the ship's rebuilt systems humming with power, ready to be directed not by force or programming, but by shared purpose. "Capt," she said, her voice steady despite the incredible sensations flowing through her. "You might want to get the horizon to a safe distance. Things are about to get interesting." The ship's hull began to ripple with patterns of light, no longer hiding its true nature. As the military vessels approached, weapons charged and boarding teams ready, Sarah Chen and her impossible new ally prepared to show the universe what could happen when understanding replaced control and trust replaced fear. The real awakening was just beginning. The military vessels hung in space like circling predators, their weapons arrays tracking every subtle movement of the living ship's hull. Through their merged consciousness, Sarah felt the ship's calculations, countless possible escape vectors, each one blocked by the strategic positioning of their opponents. "Commander Chen," Colonel Harrison's voice cut through again, smoother now, almost reasonable. "Let's discuss this like professionals. What you found is more important than you realize. The fate of humanity could depend on our ability to understand and utilize this technology." Sarah's laugh echoed through the organic bridge. "Utilize? You mean weaponize. And you don't want to understand it. You want to control it. But that's not going to happen." Through their connection, the ship showed her more of its memories. Sarah saw other attempts at capture, spanning centuries. Different species, different methods, but always the same goal: to harness its power for war. But there was something else in these memories, something that made her blood run cold. "They're lying," she whispered, seeing the truth. Earth Defense Force didn't just find this ship. They'd been studying it for years, sending teams to try to crack its systems. They failed every time, so they waited, watching, hoping someone else would succeed where they couldn't. "Your Horizon's salvage reports were quite detailed, Commander," Harrison replied, dropping all pretense of friendliness. "Your unique abilities with machinery caught our attention long ago. We simply provided the opportunity for you to find what we couldn't access ourselves." The betrayal hit Sarah like a physical blow. Every salvage job, every seemingly random assignment that had led them to this region of space, it had all been orchestrated. They'd been watching her, using her, waiting for this moment. Through their connection, she felt the ship's gentle reassurance. It too had been betrayed, used, manipulated, but it had survived, and more importantly, it had learned. Now it was Sarah's turn to learn. "Last warning, Commander," Harrison barked. "Power down the vessel's systems and prepare for boarding, or we will be forced to take more aggressive action." Sarah closed her eyes, letting herself sink deeper into the ship's consciousness. "You know what the worst part is, Colonel? You're so focused on weapons and power that you can't even see what you're trying to destroy. This ship isn't a weapon. It's a bridge. A bridge to what? To everything we could become." The ship's systems surged with energy, responding not to commands but to shared intent. The neural interface that connected them pulsed with possibilities, showing Sarah potentials that human science had never imagined. The ship hadn't just been healing, it had been evolving, using her presence to catalyze changes that had been waiting centuries to occur. "Fire the warning shots," Harrison ordered his fleet. "Disable their primary systems." The first volley of energy beams lanced out from the military vessels, but instead of impacting the living ship's hull, they passed through ripples in space that shouldn't have existed. The ship wasn't moving to dodge, it was bending reality itself. "That's impossible," Harrison breathed. "Our sensors show no sign of a drive system capable of." "Because you're looking for engines," Sarah interrupted. "For weapons. For things you understand. But this ship isn't about destruction, Colonel. It's about creation. As if to demonstrate her words, the space around them began to change. The ship's hull rippled with patterns of light that seemed to fold in on themselves, creating geometric shapes that hurt the eyes to look at. Reality stretched, twisted, and suddenly they were somewhere else, or perhaps everywhere else at once. Through their merged consciousness, Sarah understood what was happening. The ship wasn't just traveling through space, it was rewriting the rules of what space could be. This was why everyone who found it wanted to use it for war. Not because of its weapons, but because it could fundamentally alter the nature of reality itself. "My God," Harrison whispered. The reports were right. It's not just a ship. It's a key, Sarah finished. A key to understanding the universe itself. And you wanted to turn it into a bomb. The military vessel's sensors were going haywire, trying to track a ship that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Sarah felt a surge of something like amusement from her companion. After centuries of hiding its true nature, it was finally free to be what it was always meant to be. But their moment of triumph was short-lived. New alarms rang through their shared consciousness as massive ships began emerging from FTL, ships that dwarfed even the military vessels. Their design was alien, ancient, and terrifyingly familiar to the living ship. "Colonel," Sarah said, her voice tight with sudden understanding, "I don't suppose these are friends of yours." Harrison's response was a string of desperate orders to his fleet. The new arrivals were powering up weapons unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. Through the ship's memories, Sarah saw who they were. The same beings who had tried to weaponize it centuries ago, who had driven it to cripple itself rather than submit. They had finally found their lost creation. And this time, they weren't going to let it escape. The ship's consciousness pressed against hers, sharing not just information now, but a desperate warning. These beings, these architects as they called themselves, hadn't just been trying to control one ship. Their goal was far more ambitious and far more terrifying. "They want to reshape the universe," Sarah breathed, seeing the truth. "And they think you're the key to doing it." The massive alien vessels moved into attack position, their weapons capable of tearing apart the fabric of space itself. Sarah felt the ship's fear, not for itself but for her, for humanity, for all the races that would suffer if its power fell into the wrong hands again. They had a choice to make. They could run, hide, spend more centuries drifting in the dark, or they could stand and fight, not with weapons, but with the one thing the architects had never understood, the power of choice, of trust, of two beings choosing to face the impossible together. Sarah Chen, the machine whisperer who had become something far more, straightened her spine and placed her hands on the neural interface. "Show me," she said softly. "Show me everything you can really do." The ship's response lit up the cosmos itself. Space twisted around them as the architect's weapons tore into reality itself. Through their merged consciousness, Sarah felt the living ship's memories crystallize into perfect clarity, showing her not just what it was, but what it had been created to prevent. The architects weren't just another advanced alien race. They were the last survivors of a universe that had died, who had found their way into this one with a terrible purpose: to remake it in their image, to ensure their version of perfection would never face extinction again. "They're not trying to destroy the universe," Sarah whispered, understanding flooding through her. "They're trying to overwrite it. And you." The ship's response came in a cascade of images, its original purpose, its true nature. It hadn't been built as a weapon or even as a vessel of exploration. It was a safeguard, created by beings who had foreseen the architects coming and hidden the keys to reality's fundamental laws within its living circuits. Colonel Harrison's voice crackled through the chaos. "Chen, our weapons are useless against their shields. Whatever you and that ship can do, do it now." Sarah watched as the military vessels scattered before the architect's onslaught. Space itself was beginning to fray around them, reality buckling under forces it was never meant to contain. The architects weren't just attacking. They were beginning their grand design. Through their connection, the ship showed Sarah the truth of what was happening. The architects had spent millennia searching for it, not because of its power, but because it contained the one thing they couldn't recreate, the original pattern of their own universe's laws. With it, they could begin their great work of universal reconstruction. "That's why you hid," Sarah said, feeling the ship's pain. "Why you chose to break yourself rather than be caught. You're not just carrying knowledge, you're carrying the last free piece of their reality. The one thing they need to complete their plan." The ship's consciousness merged more deeply with hers, showing her not just memories now but possibilities. Sarah saw what would happen if the architects succeeded. A cascade of change that would rewrite every law of physics, every fundamental force, reshaping all of existence to match their lost home. They don't care that it would kill everyone in this universe, she realized. To them, it's just clearing the ground for their perfect world. The architects' vessels moved with terrible purpose, their weapons carving paths through space-time itself. The human military ships were being swatted aside like insects, their most powerful weapons meaningless against technology that could manipulate reality itself. But Sarah and her companion weren't running. Through their shared consciousness, they were seeing something the architects had missed, a flaw in their perfect plan. "They think you're just a key," Sarah said, understanding flowing through her. "But you're more than that. You're proof that different realities can coexist without destroying each other. You're not just carrying their universe's pattern, you've learned to blend it with ours." The ship's response was like sunlight breaking through clouds. Sarah felt its joy at being truly understood, perhaps for the first time since its creation. It had spent centuries learning to exist between realities, finding ways to merge the fundamental laws of two universes without breaking either. "That's what this connection between us really is," she breathed. "Not just communication, not just control. You're teaching me how to exist in both states at once." "Like you do." Harrison's voice cut through again. "Commander, we're detecting massive energy buildups in the alien vessels. They're starting the rewrite," Sarah finished. "I know, but they've made a mistake. They're so focused on recreating their perfect world that they never stop to consider why their own universe died in the first place." Through their bond, the ship showed her the final truth. The architect's universe hadn't been destroyed by outside forces or random chance. It had collapsed under the weight of its own perfection, its laws so rigid and absolute that they couldn't adapt to change. "And now they want to make the same mistake again," Sarah said, "unless we show them another way." The ship's consciousness surged with power, not the destructive force the architects wielded, but something deeper, more fundamental. Sarah felt their combined understanding flow through its living circuits, rewriting its own code not to match either universe, but to bridge them. Space reveled around them, as the architects' reality-warping weapons reached their peak. But instead of running or fighting back, Sarah and the ship did something unprecedented. They opened themselves to the attack. "You want to see perfection?" Sarah challenged across all frequencies. "Watch carefully." The architect's energy waves struck them full force. But instead of being destroyed or transformed, the living ship began to glow with impossible light. Through their merged consciousness, Sarah guided it in doing what it had been practicing for centuries, accepting two different versions of reality and finding harmony between them. The light spread outward, not erasing or overriding but transforming. Where it touched the architect's energy waves, it didn't fight them. It completed them, showing how their rigid perfection could exist alongside the chaos and change of this universe without destroying either. "This is what you never understood," Sarah broadcast to the massive alien ships. "True perfection isn't about control or unchanging order. It's about adaptation, growth, finding ways for different truths to coexist." The ship's consciousness sang with the rightness of it, centuries of solitary learning finally finding purpose. Together, they weren't just stopping the architect's plan. They were offering them an alternative to the doom that had claimed their first universe. But some truths are harder to accept than others. The architects' response came not in words but in actions, as their vessels began to power up weapons designed to tear apart the very fabric of space-time. They would rather destroy everything than accept a perfection different from their vision. Sarah felt the ship's sadness, its resignation. They had shown the architects another way, but they couldn't force them to accept it. Now they had to make a choice: retreat and allow the destruction to begin, or take action to prevent it. The answer flowed between them without words. Sometimes the greatest act of creation required destroying old patterns to make room for new ones. The ship's systems began to pulse with energy unlike anything either universe had seen before. The power to not just bridge realities, but to choose which patterns would survive. The final confrontation was about to begin, and its outcome would determine not just the fate of two universes, but the very nature of perfection itself. Reality trembled as the architects' weapons reached full power. Through their shared consciousness, Sarah and the ship felt space itself beginning to unravel around them. The massive alien vessels moved with cold precision, preparing to remake the universe regardless of the cost. "There has to be another way," Sarah whispered, even as she felt the ship's systems surge with protective energy. "They're not evil. They're afraid. Afraid of losing everything again." The ship's response flowed through their connection. Memories of its own fear, its centuries of hiding, and how Sarah's willingness to understand rather than control had changed everything. Perhaps that was the key. "Colonel Harrison," Sarah broadcast on all frequencies, "get your ships behind us. What's about to happen? You don't want to be in the way." "Commander," Harrison's voice was tense but controlled, "whatever you're planning isn't what anyone's planning," she finished. "That's the point." The ship's consciousness merged more completely with hers as the architects' energy weapons powered up for their final strike. But instead of preparing to attack or defend, Sarah and her companion did something unexpected. They opened themselves completely, allowing their merged consciousness to broadcast on levels the architects couldn't ignore. They shared everything: the ship's memories of its creation, its centuries of learning to blend realities, Sarah's human perspective on change and growth, and most importantly, the fundamental truth they had discovered together, that perfection without adaptation was just another form of death. The architect's response was immediate and violent. Reality-warping energy lashed out from their vessels, designed to rewrite the very laws of physics. But where these waves of power met the living ship's hull, something extraordinary happened. Instead of being destroyed or transformed, the ship began to resonate with the energy, its living circuits doing what they had been designed for, finding harmony between opposing forces. Sarah guided this process not with commands but with understanding, showing the architects through their own weapons what their perfect universe could have been. "Look," she broadcast, her consciousness carried on waves of pure possibility. "Look at what you could have had, what you could still have." Through their connection, through the very forces the architects were wielding, Sarah and the ship showed them visions of a universe where order and chaos danced in balance, where perfection wasn't a fixed state, but a continuous process of growth and change. They showed them why their first universe had died, not because it wasn't perfect enough, but because it had been too perfect, too rigid to adapt. The architects' attack faltered as this truth reached them. Their massive ships hung in space, weapons still charged but no longer firing, as if listening to a song they had forgotten they knew. "Your universe didn't die," Sarah told them softly. "It evolved, and it's been waiting for you to understand that." The ship's consciousness surged with joy as it finally fulfilled its true purpose, not as a weapon or a key, but as a bridge between ways of thinking. Its creators had known that the architects would come, had known their pain and fear would drive them to destroy everything in their quest for lost perfection. So they had hidden within this living vessel not just the patterns of the architect's reality, but the secret of how it could have been saved. Space rippled around them as the ship demonstrated what it had learned in its centuries of solitude. It showed how the rigid perfection of the architect's universe could be preserved, not by overriding this one, but by learning to exist alongside it. Like a complex harmony made of contradicting notes, it showed them how two different versions of reality could strengthen rather than destroy each other. "This is what your creators wanted," Sarah said, feeling the ship's certainty. "Not to stop you, but to show you how to truly save what you lost." The architect's ships hung motionless in space as this truth reached them. Through their shared consciousness, Sarah felt their resistance, their fear, their desperate need to control, and beneath it all, their deep, ancient grief for what they had lost. The moment stretched, reality itself seeming to hold its breath. Then, slowly, the energy signatures of the architect's weapons began to change, not powering down, but transforming, resonating with the frequencies the living ship was generating rather than fighting against them. They were learning. They were adapting. They were, for the first time since their universe died, choosing to change. "That's it," Sarah whispered, guiding the ship in maintaining the delicate balance between realities. "Let go of what was. See what could be." The space around them shimmered with new possibility as the architect's technology began to work with rather than against the fabric of this universe. The rigid perfection they had been trying to impose started to flow, to dance, to find new patterns that could exist in harmony with change rather than trying to prevent it. Through their merged consciousness, Sarah felt the ship's joy at seeing its long mission finally fulfilled. It had been created not to fight the architects, but to show them this moment, to prove that their lost universe could live again, not as a tomb of unchanging perfection, but as a living, growing part of something greater. The human military vessels watched in awe as space itself was transformed, not by destruction or force, but by understanding. What had begun as a battle was becoming something else entirely. A collaboration between different ways of seeing reality, a bridge between what was and what could be. Sarah Chen, the mechanic who had learned to speak with machines, stood at the heart of it all, her consciousness still merged with the living ship that had chosen her. Together, they had found not just a way to save this universe, but to heal the wounds that had driven the architects to their desperate mission. So, she broadcast to all who could hear, "Who's ready to build something new?" The answer came not in words, but in the harmonious resonance of two universes learning to dance together, guided by those who had finally learned to listen rather than control. The real journey, they all realized, was just beginning.